Well, hello, everyone. It's so great to be here. Welcome to this month's edition of Recruiter Table Talk. I am Kathleen Duffy. I am the president and CEO of Duffy Group, and I am here with three of my practice leaders, Colleen Neese, Kristen Posen, and Sharon Grace. We come from Phoenix, Arizona, except Sharon is in lovely southern New Mexico. So we're in the beautiful Southwest. Today's topic is on surefire questions every hiring manager should ask. And so we're really looking forward to the opportunity to share some of the strategies and questions that we use in working with our hiring leaders. But we all know that when we're interviewing candidates, it's really critical for our hiring managers to ask a combination of questions, the technical ones, behavioral, situational ones, to really assess that skill set, but they also have to be able to have questions around experience and making sure that they're a fit for the role and that company culture. And we, as all recruiters, play a really crucial role in helping the hiring leaders to qualify that candidate. We act as that bridge, right, between the candidate and the hiring leader. And we collaborate and maintain that open communication with the hiring manager by sharing the insights and the feedback from the candidate, because our eye is on the prize, right, of making sure that we help our hiring leader select the best candidate for the role. So today, Sharon, Colleen, and Kristen are going to share some of their surefire strategies as they partner with hiring leaders to help them draw out the candidate's motivation for really considering a new opportunity. So Sharon, I want to start with you because we want to start at the beginning of the recruiting process.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kathleen. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play the role of the hiring leader to kick this off. So I just got my rec approved for a position, and it doesn't matter if it's a newly created position, a replacement, or if it's a high turnover role. What I know is that the market is tight and finding the right talent continues to be a challenge. And I'm also smart enough to know that working with a recruiter, whether it's internal or external or both, will help me. So at the beginning, I want to schedule a meeting with my recruiter and discuss the position in great detail. So talking through this process will help me identify what I need and want, and also what I don't want, or the areas that I can be flexible in. So this process will help me create a roadmap that will help guide me in developing my interview questions with the candidates to determine the fit. So here are some tips that have helped me. So be able to define what makes this group attractive to a potential candidate. Why would you want to work with this group? Describe the personalities of the group as well. And what are the top 3 primary skill sets, not soft skills here, that are necessary to succeed in this role? So for example, do they need experience creating and implementing a strategy, budgeting and forecasting, designing and implementing legally compliant HR procedures and best practices? And also, what is the most important thing that this person needs to do in this role to succeed? On the flip side, what experience or skill set will not work? And what companies should we avoid recruiting out of? So that's a start to get you thinking about the interview questions. And now I'm going to pass to Colleen to keep building this process. So Colleen, I know that you have 2 of your favorite questions that you like to ask. So why don't you tell us more?
Sure. Thank you, Sharon. Yes, and Sharon, as an executive recruiter, it's our job to be curious. In fact, you're one of the most curious and inquisitive people that I know, and that really benefits our clients, I believe. And so, we really need to ask a lot of questions, and the questions are, oftentimes very specific to the industry as well as to the specific position. And so, for example, the type of questions that I'm going to ask a chief financial officer are certainly going to vary from the type of questions I'm going to ask a chief information officer versus chief financial officer. Very different type of questions. However, I do have a couple of go-to Surefire questions that I always ask, no matter what the industry is, no matter what the position is. And so one of those questions is, and I highly encourage all hiring managers to ask this question, and that is, what is motivating you to consider making a job change? Just like anything in life, we really have to get to the why behind something and understand people's motivations. And when you ask that question up front, it really lays the foundation as to what is most important to the candidate, and their answers can vary greatly, and it is certainly not always about compensation, and especially in the fields that I work in, nonprofit, for example, compensation is not the motivating factor. Typically, it's mission alignment. And so just finding out what is motivating the candidate to look at making a change, why are they talking to you? Laying down that information up front is going to really make a difference. And then as you go through the process with that candidate, for example, when you get to offer negotiation, I always go back to that motivation. So I make sure that we are offering what they originally were looking for. And the other Surefire question that I always ask, and I encourage all of the hiring leaders that I work with to ask the candidates, and that is, break down how you're spending your time. Now, that type of question can just, it just really helps you understand the person's strengths. And so what I mean by that is just bucketing their time. For example, again, going back to the nonprofit work that I do, for let's say for a nonprofit CEO, when the hiring manager, understands if the candidate, spends 50% or more of their time in, let's say, fundraising and development, that is going to be very telling to them if that aligns with what they're looking for, versus if they're the type of person who spends, let's say, 50% of their time in advocacy. So two different types of skill sets. So, those are the couple of questions that I just always love to ask. What's motivating you to make a job change? And break down how you are spending your time in your role and align that. And so I know that Kristen has worked with some clients. I believe you have some real world examples to share with us as far as a client that you worked with recently and some interview questions that the hiring leader used. Kristen, would you share those with us?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Colleen. And I love those questions. Yeah, I use a lot of those myself. So the buckets of time, super important. Well, one of my favorite clients to work with is TTI Success Insights. They're an industry-leading assessment provider. And they recently hired a new president. They're positioned for some great growth. They've been family-owned and operated for over 30 years and really needed just to bring in a new HR leader that could bring some new processes and structure to the organization. But the main thing that they wanted this HR leader to do was to bring about some culture change and to fuel that planned growth. So here's a few examples of the questions we came up with when we worked on this search. One, have you ever been with a company while they've been experiencing a culture shift? And what was your role in that shift? This question allowed us to determine if they could drive the culture change. And TTI's president really envisioned a culture that cared about character and serving others. So then that's what we were listening for in the answers. Another question we used was, give an example of how you influenced a positive outcome when several senior leaders disagreed. Again, by asking for examples, we could evaluate if the candidate could assist in the company's strategic growth by collaborating with the senior leadership team. So in the end, we identified a fantastic HR leader for their organization. We dug deeper with our interviews and addressed their biggest concerns. Asking for examples of past successes and failures can really better describe a candidate's experience more than what their resume may entail. Hiring leaders often recruit for technical skills to do the job and assess for cultural alignment. And I know here at Duffy, we do some cultural assessments as well. Kathleen, maybe you can share a little bit about how you assess for a culture fit at Duffy Group.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. And yeah, TTI is a good friend of mine. So, and their HR person is doing amazing things over there to move that company forward. So, thank you for helping them. Yeah. So, around cultural alignment, that's always kind of sometimes a squishy question, right? And so, I had the opportunity to chat with Johnny Taylor Jr., who is the CEO of SHRM, last year on my podcast. And we talked a lot about cultural alignment. And one of the things that he told me was that we have to go deeper than just asking the question, what does cultural alignment mean? So he says you need to look at your company values and develop questions around that. So I took that to heart as I started changing up my questioning around our company culture, and I looked at our core values. And one of our core values, is innovation. And so we've said this word several times in today already, is the word curious. So I really look for people who are very curious. And the question that I am asking potential candidates now is, tell me about something you are really curious about, but has nothing to do with this job. And the responses that I get are really enlightening, because it doesn't matter what they're curious about, but it lets me know that they have a curious mind. Because, as I said, we are looking for people who are curious, because that's how we innovate over here. Another question we talked about is, like, what does diversity mean to you? And, so for some people, it's about gender, race, ethnicity, but we're looking for people who have an appetite to come into an organization where reasonable minds can disagree. And so the question we're asking is, how do you approach someone who sees the world differently from you? And again, really enlightening questions to know whether or not someone is going to fit into our organization. So again, it's critical for our hiring leaders to be able to figure out if candidates are going to be able to thrive in your company environment, but probably also with their leadership style as well. So we kind of kicked things off talking about how recruiters play a critical role in helping our hiring leaders interview and qualify candidates, and how we really are that bridge between the candidate and the hiring leader. So what I want to do now is I want to talk about how we help our clients, and again, our clients are the hiring leaders, to prepare for that interview and not just come in there and wing it. So, Colleen, you have some really neat tools, and I know you're going to share them with our audience today. Can you talk a bit more about how you prepare hiring leaders for the interview?
Sure, absolutely, Kathleen. Thank you. Yes, and this is something that I started doing as I've been doing a lot of CEO searches and working with a search committee where there is a large group of people that will be interviewing the candidates, so panel interview style, and found that they really needed to have an interview guide prepared. And so that is something that we do for our clients. And by the way, we don't do them just for the CEO or panel style interviews. We have found that, for even just one-on-one hiring leaders, or with human resources, or even when they are taking a step and interviewing with peers, or those that will be their direct reports. What we have found is by having an interview guide that has been prepared is something that's just been really helpful in the process. And so, this interview guide is full of questions that, I would say about, it's about 75% sort of the standard type of questions that you need to ask about. We're going to ask that motivation question on, the front side. We're going to ask that, break down the buckets of time. But then there's going to be a lot of other similar questions, for example, leadership type of questions. But then what we do is we tailor, I would say about 25% of those questions are really going to be tailored specific to that company and specific to that role. And so by having this interview guide, it really puts the hiring leader at ease, because all hiring leaders are different in regards to their experience and comfort level in conducting interviews. Sure, some in HR, they're really good at it. That's what they've been doing. But, others, that's just not their area of forte. And so we help by providing that interview guide. And we're happy to share one with all of the viewers here today. So we've got this QR code here. This is a general template, if you will, that you can download and utilize yourself. Or if you're a candidate and you want to take a look at some of the common interview questions out there, again, feel free to access this QR code. And I do want to mention that in addition to the interview guide, we also will put together and provide a candidate matrix form. So this is a way for the hiring leader to really be able to evaluate the slate of candidates and be able to make decisions based off of real data versus just going off of their gut feelings. So always happy to share those candidate matrix forms, as well as just candidate feedback forms that might be helpful to you all.
Great. So Colleen, when you go in to work with these hiring leaders for the first, and it's the first time they've worked with you, and you share this information, this tool with them, what kind of response do you get?
Well, they really appreciate it. And again, going back to the search committee, many of them, they are all board members, very busy executives. Oftentimes it's a volunteer board role. And so anything that we can do as their recruitment partner to really just, take some of that off of their plate and ultimately help move that recruitment process along and get to the right hire. They really appreciate that, because everybody is busier than ever these days. So we hope that those tools are really providing value to our clients.
I'm sure they are. Well, that's great. Another piece of the interviewing process for many companies are assessments. And there's a variety of different assessment tools out there. And Kristen, TTI is an assessment company, but you also work with a lot of clients who use assessment. So talk to us about how we can leverage the assessment tool to be able to, again, help the hiring leaders to ask the right questions with that data.
Yeah, and also to help them make that final decision, right? So there's assessments that are out there that assess anything from just the true skills that, we opened this up with Sharon, really trying to figure out what those true skills are, whether it be in IT or accounting. Sometimes those are assessments that the hiring leader puts together themselves, very old school, or there's actually software that you can purchase through the, online to do assessments. I think my advice in terms of that goes, though, is make sure you're giving the same assessment to everybody, right? So you're not going to let anybody, cheat the system by any means. But so another type of assessment tool could be a personality assessment. I think there's a lot of companies out there that feel that in order to be a cultural fit, they really need to understand your personality. So there's tests like the predictive index is very common. Some maybe less common ones are called stress assessment, acumen. Trimetrics is an interesting program. It combines all of the assessments and then compares that to a job report. So that way you can see how the candidate truly matches up against what your idea of the ideal candidate would be in that job. And then, of course, truly just cultural assessments. Some examples would be DISC. Everyone's familiar with that. Driving forces, culture index, and then something we use here at Duffy Group is Enneagram.
Yep. Well, We love the Enneagram. And it's interesting you talk about the job match, the job report, and they did that on my position. And it was very enlightening to me because what came out, full disclosure, is that the way I responded to the assessment didn't match up with the job profile.
Oh,
But
wow.
what did match up was that I knew what I needed to ramp up. I knew my weaknesses and I knew what I needed to do in order to be successful in my role. So I think that's why there's these being able to ask those questions, because you may not look apples and apples to that. And I think after 32 years, I'm doing okay. Okay, so now we've done this whole laundry list of questions. We've drilled the hiring leader. We've said, you got to do this, you got to do this. So they're so laser focused on the skills and the job. But sometimes we forget to tell them, oh, you know what? These are people that are not looking for a job. You've got to sell them on the opportunity. So Sharon, I know that is a real passion for you. How do you coach hiring leaders on selling the candidate on the opportunity?
I know. Thank you. Selling, selling, selling. Always be selling, right? The cliche. And great insights there, Kathleen. Taking us into your world there. Thank you. All right. Exactly. If we're too laser focused on the skills, we need to get past that. I think everything that we've discussed now is heading us in that direction. Here's when I'm working with hiring leaders, and sometimes it's a team, it's a committee, such as Colleen spoke about. We want to put our best foot forward. There's that cliche. So I'll say, first of all, before I get to that, it's twofold: selling themselves and discussing the things that aren't on the description, key strategic issues. Where's the company going? Tell me more. Why do I want to be here? Okay. But there's that cliche where people leave their managers, not the jobs. Well, how about let's flip it around, that people will take a job for the hiring leader.
Yes.
That's first and foremost. And I like to pull more information out about the hiring leader and get to know their personality. And a lot of times, I have a few clients right now I'm working with, they are the selling point. And I want to get that message out there because there's something really unique with our storytelling that I like to include that in there. And as far as what's the strategy, what are the plans for this company? And I have a client right now, and through the interview process, they're talking about becoming an ESOP. And here I introduced them to a great finance professional. We didn't really discuss this in the beginning, and now this took it to a whole other level, which that's a pretty exciting opportunity that's not going to be on the job description. You need to get to the tail end of the process sometimes to learn the goodies. How about that?
Great.
So, and at this point, the recruiter has probably already identified with you the strengths and weaknesses, and if there are any of the weaknesses, and really just embellish on those and some of the things that we've already talked about. So,
great reminders, Sharon. Great reminders. So, well, I think we've got a few questions that have come in from our audience. Let's see. Is it okay to ask personal questions? Sharon, why don't you address that one? I know that comes up a lot.
Yeah, it is okay, because we're trying to find that fit. Both the candidate and the hiring leader are trying to find that fit, and we want to be more personable and just provide and show more empathy. It's important. We've learned a lot in the past few years, right? And I have a search that this was in the final interview, this was pretty much the last question. What do you do to take care of yourself? And I thought that was just pretty powerful about combining the two worlds. You know, we work, but just recognizing too that they're letting that candidate know that they recognize that you have a personal life and we want to know more about it and invite that in to our family. And that went over very well, actually, with the candidates that they did ask that. Another one is why you, why now? And that's been leaving a great impression too with some of the candidates also, and giving them that opportunity to go a little bit further. And this is a newer one that I developed this actually with a hiring leader about your passion. Why are you passionate? And this started from, it was an HR position in higher ed. So it was two areas. Why are you passionate about working in higher education? Why are you passionate about human resources? And I started using that in finance. And that's not typically a question that gets asked to an accounting or finance. And so they only want to talk about skills. And this, the candidate just loved that. So there's a little tip there.
Good, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. How do you advise hiring leaders on how to gather candidates' compensation? Kristen, I know that's your favorite.
It is. Well, there's been a lot of talk about how to ask candidate compensation, or if you even can, and laws have been changing all across the country, restricting employers on how to ask those questions. So, definitely, I'm not giving legal advice. Take a look at what your state's laws are. But currently in Arizona, you still are allowed to ask, how much money are you making? And so there's a lot of different ways you can go about that. You've read the job description. What do you feel is, a fair wage for this position, a fair salary for this position? Making sure that they're aligning with whatever the range might be without revealing the range right off the top. But there's so much more than just a base salary. So really, when you're talking about comp, you need to dig deeper. Talk about bonuses. Are they expecting to receive a bonus this year? If so, is it something that has to be repaid, or is it, if they need to stay in that position another 30 days, so maybe the start date needs to be delayed so they could get paid that bonus? Is it calculated based on their individual goals or the company's? And that also goes for the hiring leader side too. When you're talking about their bonus, lots of candidates have very specific questions on how they can earn that bonus. So make sure all of that is cleared up in the beginning. Other things that kind of creep in there are car allowance, phone allowance, home office allowance. But those things really can add up to a lot. And I would say there are certain generations that are really fond of those allowances, and if they get taken away, it's a big deal. I've seen that time and time again. And then finally, benefits. Benefits costs go up every single year, healthcare, dental. So really identifying what benefits the candidate currently has, comparing that to what the hiring leader is offering. And if there's a way to get, specific dollar amounts on what they're paying, that's really helpful. Specific coverages, just to make sure everybody's being transparent. And really, that is the bottom line, is trying to be as transparent as possible from the recruiter standpoint and the candidate standpoint about comp and benefits, and all the parties can really make a better decision.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. Well, it looks like we're at time. Time has just flown by, right? So anyway, I hope all of you have enjoyed this month's Recruiter Tabletop Talk. I know we've covered an awful lot. And if you did, we just ask you to share this with your network so that others like yourself can discover this show. We also invite you to connect with us on LinkedIn and to follow Duffy Group on all our social media platforms. We're happy to continue this conversation, to share resources, and of course, we'd love to learn from you too. So until next month, take care.
Bye.